Okay, this lesson for the Koine Project Class, I would like to address depravity, total hereditary depravity, from the view of advice. That is, if I were to advise someone, I would say don't debate depravity, always avoid apologetics, and then do as Dr. Dillard did. He distilled depravity. So we'll look at that, and I'll show you how my history with depravity, my early history. This is a book, 1977, The Church That Jesus Built. What's remarkable about this book is the organizing pastor of Landmark Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Arkansas, where I pastor right now. He had been president of seminary for approximately 22 years, and he authored this book. And in it, one of the four things identifying characteristics of a New Testament church, the number one thing was total hereditary depravity. Now, it wasn't until later, I guess, when the internet came out, and I was late to that. It was like 2010 before I even engaged it. But we had things like Dr. Graves, who was known for this research on God's sovereignty and free moral agency. Dr. Bogard, 52 doctrinal lessons concerning heresies, 52 Bible lessons, 52 doctrinal lessons. So the church was very comfortable subscribing to seminary publications. Here's one, Baptized into One Body, by S.E. Anderson. Bogard Press distributed that. Here's one, What the Bible Teaches, a handbook for Christians, by R.H. Adams. Again, we have just endless. These, I keep the most of these that I retain are because they were authored by professors of the seminary. Here's a Baptist Way book, and of course here's Dr. Harold Cooper of the Baptist Missionary Association. So people at Landmark, the faithful ones, were not only informed because of seminary publications, but because they were faithful to use them. So when later things arose in the church, some of the instigators were people identifying themselves as Calvinist. And as we were taught in the seminary, to be patient, because people won't always and don't often notice that they don't know what they're talking about, or people have low interest in the topic. They just have a lot of energy. So let's look at it, and then I would like to, I'll call your attention to, first of all, first, don't debate depravity. And the reason why is, again, when someone is not there to study, and let's say they're just making a sport of the class, well, first of all, you want to define it. And that is a good question when you lead out with what's your definition of the term, because the person who had been primed according to his understanding of Calvinism by whomever it was that were sharing their understanding, it is more about just picking up the jargon and then beginning the argument. So let's define it. And then number two, always, and I mean always, avoid apologetics. And why I say that is because the first thing you want to do is your hermeneutics, as Dr. Penn will tell you, and all the pastors I've ever met will tell you, unless you have a good hermeneutic, you won't have any rationale for what you believe. So this would be use the Bible languages, and of course, everyone says context, and you've heard this from anyone who teaches any kind of Bible. And then, of course, number three, as I say, Dr. Dillard distilled depravity. And it was so genius that if I had had that insight from such a scholarly gentleman years and years ago, I could have saved others a lot of grief in trying to understand what I was wanting to teach. And here's what he did. He said, let's take the idea of total hereditary depravity and speak of depravity of the total man. And what he did was say, let's just shift our adjective from depravity, this noun, and then let's place it over here to this. Now what that does is it gives us a chance to study anthropology, biblical anthropology. And of course, that's where we notice man is causal. He's a causal being because of the Hiphil causal stems in the Hebrew Bible, causal agency. So we don't have to argue with people who, let's say, people that say free will, which I say it of my own free will, but we don't often define it. There's a libertarian free will that insists you could do otherwise. There's compatibilistic. Who knows how many variations of that. But the Bible is very clear in the biblical Hebrew, causal agency. We've covered that several times. And then we can learn also that Adam, let's say, in his pre-depraved state, he sinned. So he didn't need to be depraved to do that. We can then notice that Adam was not deceived. Eve was. And then, of course, by Eve, Adam was persuaded to eat. Adam was persuaded. There we go. And then, of course, a key point before I walk away from this, is I'll just leave it here, is that we notice in Galatians 5:8, post-salvation, or I should have said post-regeneration. These people have been born again. The Galatian, those churches in the southern region of Galatia, they had been persuaded by a persuasion. And that word persuasion there, persuasion that Paul said was not from God, and that persuasion not from God was a different gospel. It was a different gospel, and that different gospel was post-salvation works, which Paul said to go along with that would mean Christ died in vain. That's the first consequence. There. So we can now notice that as you see the wisdom and insight here of Dr. Dillard, perhaps unsurpassed in scholarship, of renowned scholar and faithful pastor, when he distilled it down to the core here, he noticed you just move that adjective total over here. Well, that then drove the class where I now teach from this perspective, and notice man's a causal being, that Adam was, before he's depraved, he sinned. Adam was not deceived. Paul made that clear in his letters, pastoral letters. Eve was. Adam was persuaded. And then we notice that after people were born again, after they were baptized, after they had even come together as assemblies, ecclesias in the southern region of Galatia, they were so quickly removed from Christ. And then to maintain our discipline, as I try to do always in this class, because we can now go to the languages, and you notice we're not debating, we're trying to learn and understand. And as teachers in one of the Lord's churches, New Testament churches, for example, we want to communicate this information. And as someone, as I was taught to be, and always advised to remember, there are a lot of people there who studied for years. They didn't disrupt the ecclesia. They came there faithfully. They were in awe of God. They faithfully assembled on Sunday, as they would call it, the Lord's Day, and they would come there to worship in spirit and in truth. They wanted to hear the Word of God preached. They believed they were sanctified by the Word. They believed that God was there as His house, the house of God, that is the ecclesia, and they respected and revered God the Father. They knew Jesus was the head of the church. They recognized him as their shepherd, him as their Lord, him as their king, and they wanted to be taught. And I have some of their older books. I'll show you those sometime. They're very worn, if you will. So we were advised to feed these sheep. Don't go there and turn into banter. So when you go to the Septuagint, for example, we learned in 2:9, as I remind you, we know this lesson by heart now. To Zelon, the tree, and then of course this articular infinitive, and this is Adonai, the tree of the result or consequence. The consequence is what resulted. The consequence to have noticed. And I'll show you several connections here between Genesis 2:9, Matthew 7:11 that's quite remarkable. And then, of course, and continue to notice. Continue to notice. And then we remember this word, no, ston, a knowable thing. There we go. And then we notice that knowable thing was kalu, kai, and remember that conjunction there. Now, good conjoined with evil, that became quite a significant, and we noticed this was G4190, and here we have good, and this is it. This is that conjunction. Now we have this conjoined reality, good and evil, and evil. So that's quite an insight now. And what we know is we have this word here, which is very much related to G1492, that oida, ado, and oida, very much insight words. And then, of course, in Matthew 7:11, and we'll look at the correlations here, he said, since, therefore, you yourselves, since, therefore, you yourselves, poneroi, there it is, there's that word right here, I'll just make a line there, evil ones, and he said, ontes, let me get out the way, ontes, while being, there we go, while being evil ones, so ontologically speaking, they are evil ones, while being evil ones, oidate, you all, plural, have noticed, and continue to notice. Now notice here we have this connection here, amazing connections, if you will, this insight word, G1492, and you can study that and go look at oidon, ado, and notice in English, idea, in Latin, video. It's interesting. Have noticed, and then we have domata, gifts, and then interesting, we have agatha, good. So notice now we have good here and good here, and we can notice this. Some speak of studying synonyms, but what we want to do is study the two words, notice how they relate, and then how they are different, adding to our knowledge the understanding of what it is to have these conjoined. Not only have they the insight of what's good, but it says they are doing what's good, didonai, to be giving good gifts, and then of course we'll stop here, technois, himon, to the children of you all. So this is it. This is why, as we can learn now and notice that if you really want to study it out, we can study these correlations. Notice goods mentioned here. Notice we have insight. insight word here. We notice that not only do they perceive what is good, because he told them, if your child asks for bread, you don't give it a stone, or you don't give them a stone. And if they ask for a fish, you don't give them a serpent. So as I will conclude with, this is why I don't debate it. Most people wouldn't know the structure or the format of a debate, nor would they bring content that could be exchanged and evaluated. Usually it's just a banter session. Avoid apologetics. Go to hermeneutics first. Look at your languages, your context, your syntax, etymology, word meanings, on. And that way the rationale or the lack of it will become self-evident, and then do as Dr. Dillard did, distill depravity and brought it down to its core. We need to talk about man. We need to see man before Adam, before he was depraved, that depraved state where he would ontologically, he was not ontologically evil, ontologically speaking, and before he sinned. He was not deceived. So deception wasn't involved for him to sin. He was persuaded. And that's quite remarkable, because in Galatians 5:8, Paul said, we have the word bewitched. So they were involved. They were being subject to a persuasion that's a different gospel, which was a product of something we would have quite a concern about, being bewitched. And so this is it. It's a good lesson. And I only wish I had known this insight and wisdom of here to go and start with mankind first, start with my hermeneutics first, define it first, because there's been a lot of years where it's been nothing more than someone emotes, and then I would respond in kind, if you will, rather than in the text, or supposedly from a more cognitive perspective. So enjoy this lesson and have a blessed day.